Hello everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate you stopping by. And just know this is your one-stop shop for cryptocurrency analysis, among other things. Now we're taking a look at Nano, which is a very interesting coin I've covered a few times in the past, and I've got a large community based around this, so thank you all for reaching out and asking that I cover this. Good to see some price action, some price movement again, right? I think we're all happy about that. But just before we get started, I'm not a financial advisor. This is for educational purposes only. You should always do your own research. And just know I have tons of trading experience, and my goal is to help you trade for a lifetime, help you understand best practice, and maybe help you find a good entry point, but just teach you to trade for a lifetime instead of just for one day. Right? So I don't want you to have to rely on me. I want you to be self-sufficient. You will discover that in due time if you stick around. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. But just before we do, I have a link to my Telegram community and my Patreon account if you'd like to show your support. Furthermore, $25 in Bitcoin if you'd like to reference that as well from Voyager. And also note I'm going to be doing live streams here very, very soon, as well as a signal group that I'm going to have on my Patreon as a premium option. Be on the lookout for that. Check that out in your own time. But of course, without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right to it. All right, traders, let's go ahead and take a look at Nano. And just before we do, as per usual, if you're new to the channel, we always like to reference Bitcoin and Ethereum first, just so you understand what's going on in the market and we can make a well-informed decision when taking entry in this climate. Okay, so we'll take a look at Bitcoin first. And just so you know, this is a TradingView desktop application, fantastic program. I used to use Binance, but TradingView was within, of course, but there's certain limitations there that are a lot better here through TradingView, so that's the main reason I'm using this here moving forward. But it is still the same song and dance. I'm going to use the 50-day moving average, that's this yellow line here, and the 200-day moving average. Those are my standard indicators because that's essentially the industry standard. That's what all the bots and the industry leaders are using. So it's important to get on board with what they're doing and utilize the same things. So with a 4-hour chart here, that's my favorite chart time frame for swing trading, or essentially just understanding how the moving averages are affecting the price action. So taking a look here, you can see the 50-day moving average is working as a support. It was a previous resistance that was tested for about 24 hours and recently broke above. So I would say in the last 24 hours, we've seen some good price action. As you can see here too, we've got some higher highs, right? Higher highs and higher lows. That's a very, very good sign, right? So just keep that in mind. This is something that's looking very good. Bitcoin is, I guess you could say, essentially bullish, but it feels weird saying that, right? But either way, that is essentially what we're looking at for that. Furthermore, we've got 42,000 for the resistance level for Bitcoin. So that's one of the next major resistance lines. Bear in mind, there was a resistance level tested 3 times and rejected at about 40,300. That could be the next major milestone, so approximately 40,000. And then, of course, we have a strong support at, 30,000, as we're pretty familiar with the China candle just hit us hard that day. All right, so that's kind of what we're looking at for Bitcoin. All in all, pretty good shape. This feels weird saying that, but I feel good with the price action right now for Bitcoin. Moving on to Ethereum. Very similar price action here. In other words, you can kind of see, the actual, everything that came down here, ever since then, it looks almost identical to Bitcoin. Only difference is it's slightly higher, right? As you can see, the 50-day moving average is a little bit lower, as well as the fact that Ethereum has tested this. Look at this, how many times this is tested. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Pretty much, you could even just say 10 times, right? It's tested this resistance level at 2,900 almost 10 times. Okay, so it's likely going to, test it again and then break it. Because you can only test a resistance level or support level so many times without it being broken. And once it's broken, it becomes a super strong, just say in this case, a support, right? So there's something to note. If we can break above 2,900, it'll likely hold and consolidate there and then test the $3,100 range in the near future if Bitcoin can continue to just progress the way that it's going. Even if Bitcoin goes sideways for a few more days and just stays at 37 to 39,000, we're gonna be looking in pretty good shape here for Ethereum, because this is the #1 altcoin that people flock over to when Bitcoin goes sideways. All right, so that is Ethereum. Now let's go ahead and take a look at Nano. And we're going to look at the 1-day chart first, just so we can get a baseline of the big picture, because I think it's extremely important to know, overall how things are performing. And as we can see here, there's some really strong price action. This is interesting right here. Take a look at this. April 17th, that was the exact same day that we had the very first Bitcoin sell-off, like what we lost 15% in an 8-hour period. But look at what Nano did. I think that happened just before, honestly, and then it was ramping up so hard that it kept that momentum, but it eventually retraced back down almost all the way. So that was a tough time for Nano. I bet there's a lot of people that got caught in that. Then it ramped back up, and what's interesting is it hit hard here on the 13th, and that's the same day, basically the day after, rather, we had that Elon candle. And so it was May 12th. And then, of course, it couldn't recover fast enough. May 18th and 19th, that's the China candle here. So all in all, Nano's performed fairly well, contradictory to the other coins. In other words, most other coins were doing poorly when Bitcoin was doing poorly. Nano has a tendency of recovering and doing quite well. Yes, it retraced a few times, but I mean, just that's normal math, right? What comes up must come down. But it's done very, very well. So it goes on these little strong tears, and it's really kind of cool. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see another one soon, because I do feel like the average price range for Nano should be in the, $9 to $12 range. So we're getting close to that. Also note too, the price came up to the 50-day moving average, and it's kind of holding as a support/resistance line. So we'll see what happens there soon. RSI is still pretty low though. So I like the fact that the RSI is low. But it makes sense because the price has been really low for a while too, right? So it just basically tells us we have a lot more room for growth here, which is, again, a very good sign for Nano. So looking at the 4-hour chart, let's take a peek here. Price is getting rejected at the 200-day moving average. Big surprise, the 200-day moving average is a very strong resistance. Look at this, it resisted here, and it also resisted almost 4 times in that span as well, shortly after the China candle. Okay, so just pay attention to this. Once the price comes above and holds above, that will likely be a new support, and we'll continue to see the price action increase from there, most likely. Again, the price has to close above. As you can see, it's never truly closed above, and that's what tells us that it's broken its resistance, right? Has to close above. All right, furthermore, we got the 50-day moving average, this yellow line here as well, working as a support level now. So it's got this nice little channel here. It may continue to try to consolidate a little further within and then go for another ramp up past that. But anytime you see a resistance level on the 200-day moving average, when you see it get broken, it's going to get broken hard. So if we see a new 4-hour candlestick open here, it will likely shoot up even further. So I'd speculate if the price were to break this resistance level, it's going to break pretty hard and pretty fast, which is really, really common for moving averages in this scenario, right? So just pay attention to that. Also, furthermore, too, just note RSI is up over 70, not a problem. But if you're considering to, trimming your position, wait perhaps for the RSI to come back down and calm down under 70, and then obviously look at the 15-minute chart to identify if it's worth exiting your position. Okay. Now, as far as taking a position, we'll look at the 15-2 to identify that. But at this point, I do like the price action, but this is a really big green bar essentially on the 4-hour chart, so I'd like to hopefully see some consolidation soon. All right, so looking at the 15 here, what do you see here that's pretty awesome? Well, the 50-day moving average is working as a support. Just kidding. That doesn't really matter. Just kidding. Now, I say that because the moving averages, the simple moving averages, are less effective on the shorter time frames. Okay, whereas the exponential moving averages are more effective on the shorter time frames. So we should only be using the EMA line, not the simple moving average lines, based on the simple fact that they're more, those are more effective for longer time frames, EMA shorter time frames. So the red line here is the EMA line. That's the exponential moving average. And the exponential moving average essentially is just telling us that the price is either bullish or bearish, right? So it works a lot like the MACD. If you're familiar with the moving average convergence divergence, it essentially is a momentum indicator, right? It's an oscillator that tells us the momentum of bulls and bears and how they're kind of fighting it out. This is the same thing, only it's relative to the price action. So I think I kind of like it a little bit better. It's basically like overlaying a MACD line on the price. In other words, this is a 15-day moving average. I use the 15-day EMA, and most standards for, I think at Binance and a few others, you're going to see 9 and 20. I use 15, split the difference, only just have one, makes much more sense for me. But the key takeaway here is that when you get confirmation knowing that the price is above, when it drops below, you see this consolidation period, and then it decided it wants to get bullish again, and it's come back up again. So there's something important to pay attention to. Furthermore, I also utilize the volume weighted average price, the ViewApp line. Now the ViewApp is this blue line here, and that's essentially the average volume in the last 24 hours expressed as a price. Okay, so right now the price action, in other words, the price itself should be $8.31. As you can see, it's $8.93. Okay, so the price is well above where the average volume should be, or is rather. In other words, the price should be down here a little bit lower. Not saying that's bad that the price is up here. It just means that if it goes up too high and too fast, it'll likely come back down to meet the ViewApp line, and it'll also test the EMA line. Okay. So just something to note. That's kind of how the ViewApp line works. You also have the standard deviation lines here as well, and these are essentially just telling us that the price is, it's testing that really high point, and that's kind of holding the price in this little range. So those deviation lines are helpful because as soon as the price comes above, it almost always naturally retraces itself. Like look right here, big surprise, we saw a retracement. Okay, right here, wouldn't be surprised if we saw another retracement and then some consolidation, perhaps another run. So again, just want to make sure you be mindful of that, because that's essentially how those work. So to find a good entry point in this climate, I would recommend you wait for the ViewApp line to be tested again, so let the price action come down and calm down and test the ViewApp line, and also see how it reacts to the EMA line. In other words, this EMA line, the red line here, if you see the price kind of do what it did previously here and continue upwards with the EMA, then let it ride. But as soon as you see it break, kind of like this here, be cautious, be aware. Don't necessarily exit your position if you have a long position right now, but just be mindful of how it's reacting. In other words, we want to look at the RSI and double check. You see how the RSI is up over 70 still. Until it comes down below 70, that may not be a good indication of a sell signal yet. If it can stay over 70 and keep consolidating, we'll be looking good. But to me personally, I never try to exit my position until the RSI comes down under 70, just so I get that confirmation that the it's going sideways for a while, and it wouldn't hurt to kind of call it a day for a little bit. Again, just depends on what you're doing. If you're planning to hodl and hold on for dear life, and you're just looking for a good entry point, then you would want to wait for 2 solid green bars. I'll explain that in a second, but unless you're hodling per se, you really should just make sure to pay attention to these things that I'm referring to. Okay, because if you hodl or you're holding on for a long time, you're really just taking entry wherever arbitrarily and exiting when you feel like it. Okay. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you're going to do a short-term swing trade or a day trade, then you have to utilize these 2 indicators. Another thing to note as well, and I'll give you that example of just say you're a hodler or any type of trader, how would you take a good entry here? Well, what you do is you wait for 2 solid green bars to occur above EMA and the ViewApp line. Now, all of my current subscribers already know this, they've heard it, I'm a broken record, I recognize that, but I have to say it in every video because it needs to kind of sink in. And the reason why is because if you take entry too early and the price reverses on you, you can essentially lose out. So I always recommend doing 2 things. First of all, you wait for confirmation, which is essentially waiting for 2 solid green bars above the EMA and the ViewApp line. Okay. Furthermore, you also want to make sure that you take a small position. Okay. You don't want to take a full position. Again, unless you're planning to hodl or you're going long for days, you don't want to touch this for 6 months or something like that. Put in whatever you'd like. You know what you're going to put in. Just be expected to lose that, right? But when it comes to shorter time frames or anything less than, I would say, a month, you want to make sure to be cautious and be careful and not take a full entry. And the reason why I say that is because you want to add to your position as you get confirmation. Now, some of the best traders are the ones that are going to be doing this, just because you can average up or down your positions as you see fit, again, depending on market conditions. So let's just say, for example, you want to wait for confirmation. So looking back here, as we can see, there's a lot of consolidation, but what would look like a good 2 solid green bars above EMA and ViewApp lines here? Well, we don't have a lot of good examples of that here. I mean, there is one here technically, and that could have worked, but that's kind of risky just based on the fact that the price action was had just jumped up over EMA and ViewApp. I try to avoid that. I like it when the price is already above. In other words, what I'm getting at here is if we look at, just say this for example, these 2 or these 3 here. That's a good solid little chunk, right? You can kind of tell, okay, bulls are in control, right? Also, the price action is above EMA and ViewApp, and it's not overextended here on the upper line, right? So that standard deviation is still low. That's a good sign. So that would be a consideration for an entry point. Now, just say you took entry here, and you write it up, and you see, okay, price is going sideways here, and then coming up, comes back down, but look at this. See how it tests the EMA line and holds and stays above? That's fantastic. You hold your position in that case. If it would have kept on going much lower, or just say it broke the ViewApp line, then that would be a consideration to possibly sell your position or trim it off. You'd still take a profit, right? It may not be super large, but that would be 1.5%. It's not terrible. I've been really happy with 1.5%. Honestly, it's not bad. Furthermore, just say you took that position there and you held and you didn't bother to sell. Price keeps coming up, up and up, comes down, and lost EMA and ViewApp. So a good consideration, a safe consideration, would be to consider trimming your position right here, or to also make sure to pay attention to RSI and wait until the RSI comes back down. In other words, you see right here the second little run. When the RSI starts coming back down, this is where I usually like to take or trim my position. So it'd be somewhere in this range here, right? So for example, if he'd done that, that would have been about a 4-hour trade, and you would have netted approximately 6.8%. Again, plus or minus, but that's the general idea. And if you look here, obviously, again, see if you'd gotten impatient, you just sold because the price come down, then you would have only gotten 1.5%. That's why it's important to utilize the EMA and the ViewApp lines together, because this right here gave us the opportunity to continue because it didn't break both of these lines. Okay. All right, so just say that all happened, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm out of my position here. I'm going to take another entry later. You can essentially do the same thing, right? You find these two solid green bars closing above EMA and ViewApp. Take your position, see how it bounces right here and continues up. Say it held it up there until the RSI comes back down, which it is right about here. That would have been a huge profit. You would have gained roughly about 16% on that. Okay, so again, these are just ways of identifying entry points essentially. A lot of people have trouble, and it's difficult to wait for these two solid green bars to close in a 15-minute time frame. In other words, that's a total of 30 minutes that you're waiting just to take entry. So there's no doubt that patience is a virtue, and it's something you have to do or utilize essentially, a skill set you have to be successful in this type of trading style. This isn't for everyone. I mean, you can trust those other folks that tell you to 10x, 20x, and 30x just by jumping in when they jump in. But if you don't understand and know these things and know how to pay attention to the signals and get out, you're going to be kind of left with a short end of the stick. That's why I like to help teach you and understand these things. So hopefully you found benefit here. If you do, please like and subscribe. Feel free to comment below. Join my Telegram community, my Discord channel. I've got those in the description as well. I'm also going to work on, or actually I am working on it right now, signal groups to essentially allow for you to benefit. That'll be part of my premium Patreon channel. Okay, so reference that later. That is upcoming and soon to be released. Another thing I'm doing as well is live streams, and I'll start doing that on the weekends and probably transition that into the weekdays eventually, just to kind of see how that goes. So feel free to reference that. I'll likely have that on either Saturday or Sunday moving forward here, so we can all have some fun together, right? It kind of sounds cool, right? So either way, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you coming, join along. Hope you have a great rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. Have a good one.